My name is Michael Konnert. I am the founder and CEO of Vizsla Silver. Vizsla Silver is traded on the TSX-V and the NYSE under the ticker VZLA. And we have a vision of building a very large single asset silver primary producer with our Panuco Project in Sinaloa, Mexico.
Michael, really good to see you again. It's been 6 months since I last spoke to you. It's been about 4 months since you spoke to Crux. Quite a lot has happened since then. Do you want to just... you also recently put out an outlook for 2023, which covered some of the main highlights from 2022. So could you just start by kind of giving us kind of state of the nation of where you are as a company, what you've got to, what you've done so far?
Well, it's been a thrilling year for us so far since we doubled our resource basically in January. And that's actually created a heck of an opportunity for investors, I believe, too, because the share price stayed generally the same. So we've doubled the value of our asset in a sense, and increased the grade of the resource, and you can still buy it for what I consider to be a very, very attractive entry level here. I just bought some stock the other day, but Vizsla is very actively, very aggressively looking to expand this resource that we have here currently, which we announced in January, and make new discoveries. And one of the things that we're very excited about is the potential discoveries nearby Copala, Napoleon, Tajitos, what we refer to as our center of mass. And I think what would be worthwhile is for us to talk about what we're seeing in terms of this resource area, and how it feeds into our own internal scoping studies and what we're seeing, for the development of the project. But it's really clear to us that the western portion of the district here is critical for the development of our mine, and this will be the focus for us going forward. But I'd like viewers to know that it looks like we're having some very exciting potential success with drilling near our resource area at the Copala, specifically the Copala area. So
just to put things kind of in context, you put out your first resource. Your maiden resource was published, I think, in March last year, and then you did another 120,000 meters of drilling, more or less. You had 9 rigs running for much of last year, and you have just published a new resource. And you've taken your can you just run me by the kind of the global numbers, the indicated and the inferred, and you've taken the grade up as well. Can you just give me the summary of the new resource, please?
Well, it's essentially 219 million ounces of silver equivalent. The grade is approaching that half kilo mark now on a global basis. But really, what's exciting is the Copala area and the growth we're seeing at the Copala area, which now has about 51 million ounces of indicated, 55 million ounces of inferred. The average grade of Copala is well over 500 grams. In the inferred category, it's higher than 600 grams silver equivalent. But the crazy thing about Copala is that it's 10 meters thick. It's a very thick structure at grades that are spectacular, and 2-3 times the average grade of an underground mine in Mexico, with a thickness that's 5 times the average grade of average thickness of an underground mine in Mexico.
And it's relatively flat lying, isn't it? It's compared to the other subvertical Napoleon and Copala's kind of, from what it looks like on plan and section, it seems to be more gently dipping.
It is gently dipping. It starts out at about 35 degrees and goes for about 200 meters, and has a flexure point about 200 meters down dip. And at which point it actually steepens up to about 55 degrees in angle there. So on average, this is more or less a 45 degree average dip between the first section and the deeper section. But it basically starts from surface, so it's really quite interesting.
And Copala is open. Just on your presentation or your news release, I can't remember where I saw it, but it got open north to south and down dip.
Yeah, that's right. So we've stepped out about another 150 meters, so over 10% growth to the south now. To the north, it's open as well, but there's community area that we would basically step over. We wouldn't be drilling in the community, but to the south of the known resource area, it's wide open, and certainly down dip as well. And then one of the most exciting things that we've encountered recently is the potential for there to be an uplifted block of Copala to the east, where some early drilling has shown indications that might be possible, and there may be the potential for perhaps another Copala to the east of the existing deposit.
What understanding do you have about the size of that and the thickness of it? I mean, does it look like a repeat of Copala? How many meters do you have? Have you got defined along strike of it? Just kind of more info, please.
Well, we don't have the strike information yet. We've essentially put one hole into it, and it'll take us some time, I think, to complete the 6 or 7 other holes that we'd like to do on it. And until that time, I don't think we can really speculate on strike. But other than to say, if it's a chunk of Copala that's been faulted off and brought closer to surface, then it should be, I would imagine, 1 kilometer in strike if it's it's equal to what we have at Copala, and most likely a lot longer. So I think probably the upside potential here is that we find something that's the equivalent to what we already see here at Copala, which is half of our resource. It's 106 million ounces of silver equivalent between indicated and inferred at Copala. I think there's the potential for that to be a repeat of that. And it's also possible that, it could be bigger, but it also could be smaller. We just don't know. But I do know that there are other flatter lying thick structures like Copala in the district. And so I will not be surprised when we find another Copala-like structure that's thick and high grade. So this is all just part of the work that we have to do to find full value here in this district.
Do you is there a lot of kind of grade variability as you go along strike at Copala? I mean, what do you have to drill it at 20-meter centers or 40-meter centers or 50? Roughly, do you know kind of what the line spacing is at Copala?
Well, the variability, we've actually been quite impressed by the consistency of the grade throughout. Of course, we have these very high grade plugs or zones that we've intercepted in broader lower grade, or I shouldn't say lower grade, but broader medium grade intersects. Like our first hole into Copala further to the north was about 82 meters, I believe, of over 200 grams silver equivalent. But in that, we had up to 7 kilo silver equivalent in it. So that's kind of the variation that you see in some cases. But essentially, despite those high grade phases in the mineralization, it is relatively consistent. Removing those. So what we will do is, I believe, we'll to get to reserve status, it would be probably closer to 20-meter spacing. And this is something that we are going back and forth with right now with not only our resource consultants, and we have an incredible team even in-house. Steve Mansell, our senior resource geologist, is doing a great job, and internally, and but we also work with Ausenco and other consultants, just basically to understand what we're going to need to do to increase the confidence of that Copala resource area and do some in-depth mine planning. A lot of that's already started. We're getting
in your outlook, you talk about de-risking through technical studies and infill drilling. You also talk about extension drilling and more exploration. Let's just start with the de-risking, and you've got 7 rigs, I believe, on site, and so how many rigs do you think roughly will kind of, or rather, what's your split of efforts or budget between kind of de-risking, understanding the increasing your drill hole spacing in your already defined envelope, and doing technical studies?
Well, to us, de-risking absolutely includes that infill drilling, and we're looking to do about 15% infill drilling of the call it 90,000 meters of exploration drilling that we're doing this year. I should say, sorry, of the 90,000 meters of total drilling that we're doing this year. And then so that leaves 85% for exploration, and we do include near resource expansionary drilling as part of exploration. But let's say infill drilling is within the resource areas, as we've defined. And that's because first of all, 15% is it's a reasonable amount of drilling. I think it's going to add value, but we also want to be very clear that this isn't a mature exploration story. This is a really immature exploration district. We haven't even fully completed the geological map yet, and that's something that's kind of exploration 101 really. And it's not, of course, because we're lazy. It's just because this district is very big, and we're working on it full time. But that gives you an example of just how much work there is left to do, and so with our 90,000 meters this year, it's going to be very exciting because our bulk of those meters will be drilled. It's something that can actually create a lot of value for the company, which is growing a resource area and finding new high grade centers.
It's also one has to be careful about the curse of that, of putting out your resource and limiting growth. It's the life cycle of a resource or a development asset. The Lassonde curve is that the market thinks, they've stopped growing. Now they've got 5 years of technical studies. Whereas if you can continue to show exploration growth, you can continue to kind of prove up value in your district play or your regional play.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we're of course cognizant of is we know that there's a challenge that the company can have once they just certainly once you found everything, and then you have to go into dilutive financing in order to to build a mine. And that's something that I think is unique about Vizsla in the sense that we don't have that same issue because we've only explored, the resource sits on less than 10% of the total vein strike that we have in the district. There's no way that in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to test all of our targets here, and it's probably unlikely that we'll test a meaningful amount of the targets that we have just because there are so many and we keep finding new ones. So this is the type of story that I believe it's going to have a low capex, so the threat of a big financing isn't as troublesome to our company as it would to others. But it's also going to be one of these companies that has the potential to continue to grow through exploration all throughout any type of construction or even production phase. It's totally unique in that sense, and that I really don't believe that we're going to be finding everything there is to find here in the next 5, 10, even 20 years.
It's nice, isn't it, when the Copala really strikes me as an asset which can be brought into production. It's an ideal starter asset, but you've got the runway of the regional play. But just on the exploration that you've got this year, the 85% of your 90,000 meter target that you're going to be drilling this year, have you got a kind of a method on how you're going to be reporting? Is it going to be on a kind of a strict quarterly basis or every 2 months, or is it going to be a little bit more responsive to if you get some good news?
It's absolutely responsive, and I actually saw a chart last year. I saw a chart on Twitter about last year, and companies that put news out and the companies that put the most amount of news releases out, and we were number one. So we're constantly putting out drill releases, updates to the market, and that's really important to me because as a shareholder of these companies myself, or as a participant in this market, I know that news is the lifeblood of these companies, and so I think it's extremely important for us to keep our shareholders in the market up to date on what's happening, and so we'll do that. I'm hoping it's every 2 weeks, but it may be every 2 weeks to a month if things slow down. But we'll have news coming from Copala, from infill drilling that's going to have nice hits that we'll be able to put out, I'm sure. We'll have expansion drilling at Copala. We'll have potential information around the possibility of a new discovery to the east at the uplifted block, and slash our hunt for other Copalas in the district. We'll have news on La Luisa, where we appear to have made a discovery. We'll have news on Cuatro de Mayo, which looks to be coming together quite well. Napoleon, some of the drilling that we're doing in the center at the Animus vein, we'll have some information there. And then, gosh, we'll have lots of information on, just project updates as we continue to de-risk through our environmental studies. We're going to do environmental baseline and ESG summaries and documentation that we'll put out later this year. There's just so many catalysts and so many pieces of news that we'll be putting out this year. But it's definitely not quarterly. It's going to be more frequent.
And talking about catalysts, you mentioned that your share price has kind of flatlined for the last 6 months. 2022 was a horrible year for the resources sector. It was a horrible year for exploration and development companies. And lots of companies would be delighted to say that their share price is the same as it was 6 months ago, because many are much, much lower than they were. What do you think are the catalysts? I mean, you talk about the kind of, you're going to be giving regular news flow. Like, let's say you manage to put out a news release every 3 weeks. What do you think it's going to take for the market to say, actually, this is really going places, and for the share price to move significantly?
Well, I should say that, we seem to be coming back off of our recent lows here, certainly trading above the financing price, which is a strong indication, and kind of churning through a lot of volume and breaking into the 170s. So I think naturally share price is going to re-rate, and I'd like to think that we're going to be over $2 here relatively soon and making our ways to all-time highs in the near term. But what I think is going to drive that, there's the stuff that we can control, and there's the stuff that we can't control. What we can't control, which I think will probably influence this, is strength in the precious metals. When we saw that, a few weeks ago, we saw Vizsla on the back of good news nearly break through $2, and virtually we did we have to do the financing, and that saw the share price come off a little bit. But now we're in a position where we have over $60 million in the bank. We have a resource update coming in the second half of this year. Following that, we'll have a PEA at some point when it makes sense for us. So, we have some major catalysts coming, and every day our per EV per ounce metric, it almost gets cheaper because we're finding new silver basically every day as we drill. So eventually, the market's going to wake up to this. But this happens sometimes, and this is actually exactly when people make money in this business. It's when they're buying these stocks when they're not in high demand, and you could sit there and you can build a big position on something that is mathematically it's cheap compared to its comparables, and you have reasonable confidence that there's going to be the success that the company talks about. So these are the opportunities. I like I said, I just bought another $20,000 worth of stock in the market the other day. You'll see that our insiders have always been net buyers. Craig, our chairman, has bought a ton of stock at twice its price. So we eat our own cooking, and we think this is very cheap. But of course, we have a view, and our vision is to become one of the world's largest single asset silver producers here. And I can tell you from what we've looked at in our internally in our own models, I think we're quite comfortable with our baseline production profile, which we've always talked about as 12 million ounces. That's in line with what San Dimas does, which is nearby to us. And our project is kind of similar to a San Dimas of 200 years ago. One that hasn't been consistently mined for many, many years. And so we look at this as a long-term business plan, and I absolutely think that Vizsla is going to be a multi-dollar stock in in the near term, but I think it could be a major player in the silver industry, in the future, just even on our Panuco district alone. So, I try not to look at the share price variations day to day, because I know that the big goal and the vision is so much bigger, and I know all of our shareholders will be rewarded, in due time. So.
Thank you. You've got, I think 45% of your shareholder register is institutional. Did that mostly come in through the placings, through the financings? Or has there been any conversation about an institution buying on the open market and building position?
We definitely have institutions buying on the open market. There'll be ones that have bought a portion of their position of what they'd like to own during a placement, and basically continue to add to their position on the market. There's a very strong group of institutions that are behind the story right now. There's also a high net worth broker that's been consistently buying stock, for his accounts and for himself. So we have a very good number of groups on the market buying. But this is really the moment. Recently, this recent financing has seen us really go now from a more retail-driven story to an institutional story. So that move has just happened in the last month or so.
And is there a change in volumes? Have you really picked up? I mean, you referred to volumes, so I'll make a little bit more detail on that, please.
Our average volume has probably gone up by about 20-30% certainly since the fall of last year, which I think marked kind of the fall really marked the bottom of the industry for in terms of volumes. It was pretty dead. But I think our volumes have gone up from there. They're probably in line with some of our top volume back when things were a little bit hotter back in 2001. But still slowly gathering steam, and our NYSE listing volume has increased as well too, from what I can tell. So we're starting to see that kind of transition from Canadian-dominated trading to more on the NYSE, and I think eventually it's probably will coincide with higher share prices. Is Vizsla's primary trading being done on the New York Stock Exchange.
Sorry, forgive my ignorance. Have you got a proper listing there or an OTC listing?
We do have a full listing on the NYSE.
Yeah, I can imagine that taking a bit of a grip, particularly with as you go kind of more towards the development assets. Just changing subject completely, going to something that comes up in your outlook for 2023. You talk about a discussion with 8 communities and trying to kind of get a 30-year access or kind of a community engagement plan written down. Can you kind of talk to me about those 8 communities and the philosophy behind it and how you're approaching that?
Well, I've been very impressed by our team here. In our district, because we have 5 ejidos that are a part of this district, and although they were long-term mining communities, the companies didn't have, when we started off, we didn't have long-term basically production agreements with these ejidos. So over the last couple of years, we've now entered into 4 of these agreements with the ejidos, and so all the areas that are affected by our resource, or all the areas that our resources are within, are now under 30-year operating agreements with the four primary groups, and we expect the final one to be signed relatively.
What's the word you use? Ejido,
which is the landowner group. Basically, it's not an indigenous group. It's essentially the group of landowners in the area.
And are they operating small scale kind of underground mines themselves? Is this artisanal mining?
They were, and now most of them, 70% of our team comes from the local communities. So about 100 people from the local communities work for us. So they've gone from small scale artisanal mining to being driller helpers or geology helpers, or geologists even training for becoming geologists, things like that. But traditionally, this has been a a long-term. It's not artisanal. Artisanal is not necessarily the right word for it, although we often use that word. It was organized mining, certainly, and skilled mining, but just not done on a small scale. But when I first got down to this project in early 2019 versus where we are now with the communities, it's been a wonderful transition where you can see the improvement to these communities that relative affluence, I suppose. Maybe that's not the right word either, but the relative standard of living increase is totally noticeable, and something that I'm very proud of is to see how this community has benefited from our presence and investment.
Sorry, can you shed a bit more light on the split between the landowners, or the kind of the owners of the mining rights, and the local communities that live there? Were some of those landowners not from the local community, are you talking about a few families that owned kind of a few veins, or is there a community that used to work in those hills there? How does it work?
So the Ejidos are everywhere in Mexico. They basically, even if you were to build a Walmart factory or Walmart store, you'd have to consult and deal with the Ejidos and kind of make a deal with them. So mostly they're comprised of people that live in the communities, but sometimes people move away, and they still have some sort of representation throughout the through the Ejido. So it actually is kind of a challenging task to go and have do these deals with the Ejidos, which is what makes the work that Antonio and Hernando, our team in Mexico, have done so impressive. Is that it's certainly not an easy task, so these would be landowners, farmers, miners, really a mix of people that live or have land in the areas that are around our properties. So of course, this is this spreads across the whole district. There's 5 of them in total. We have deals with the 4, and the 5th that we don't have the operating agreement with. We have a long-term production agreement with. So we have agreements in place with those Ejidos. The ground would essentially be residential in some cases, small and simple houses, farms where they grow a bit of corn. There's not a really a major agricultural industry in this area. It's really mining, and so that's really the breakdown there of the Ejidos.
This is all part of the kind of the preparation, and presumably, if you're starting to employ them on a more sustainable basis, and they've got more sustainable and stable income, this is what you're talking about, the small changes that you've seen in the last 3 or 4 years there.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the most important thing, though, aside from monetary or income, is that mining is a dangerous business if it's done informally, especially underground mining. We've actually just passed 1 million LTI hours free, 1 million hours free of long-term loss of time incidents. So we have a safety track record that's probably better than the major mining companies. And so our the communities, the people that work for us, having gone from dangerous underground mining now to a company that values safety, I think that's the most important thing. So everybody gets to go home at the end of the day is great, and so it ends up attracting more people to come work for us.
Thank you for giving me the time to kind of answer those questions, because these cultural things are so important. They can really derail a project if you get it wrong, and it's also so important to get that community level buy-in, that there's a management of expectations of everybody who you're meeting. Sometimes the trouble comes from external sources, and I wonder if you've come across any of that, because it's relatively common in South America, and it's happened a bit in Mexico as well, that there's external mal-influence, shall we say. Have you suffered any of that?
No, we haven't, and Sinaloa seems to be a little bit outside of that. There's a few different kind of guidelines or sayings in Mexico, and I won't go through all of them, but there's certain areas that I think it's easier to work. Nowhere is easy to work, that's for sure. But Sinaloa, appears to be a little bit outside of the the NGO and third party with malinfluence areas, and that's because the communities are very supportive of the work, and the communities are really what drive that. And so, with these 4 operating agreements in place, and a great relationship with the local Seminat, and everything that we need to be doing has been done and achieved smoothly with the help of our team. And I take very little credit for any of this, because it's our team, Hernando and Antonio, who and Martin, our COO, who really drive these great relationships. And it's not that they got lucky either. This that they've been doing this for 3-4 decades, and in Mexico directly with some of the world's biggest mining companies. So we're in good hands with our team there, and that's a lot of the benefit that we see.
Thank you. Now, every time I kind of look through your marketing materials and I look through your presentation, I get pretty excited about Copala. I mean, it looks like the kind of asset that could stimulate capital. Could drive capital towards it. Because right, this is a good place to start. This is the kind of thing that it could give us a few years or maybe even a decade of mine life. You must already be thinking about that. You've mentioned you're bouncing ideas off it, and yet you're talking about doing the resource estimate upgrade in the second half of this year. Tell me a bit more about the PEA and what you're doing towards kind of getting a public wrap around the first set of economics and technical studies.
Well, first of all, I guess just to think, certainly the resource is going to be important, but PEA and entering into economic studies is going to let the public know how how it's going to look basically as we move forward into production, what those parameters are, what the economics are, and I think that they're going to be very impressive. And I say that just because of what we see here at Copala. I think that any incremental growth in our area at Copala and high grade is going to be very important for economics here. So, if you see Copala grow another 100 meters to the south, or grow to the east, or Cristiano continue to grow, where we see the highest grades on the property and the resource, that's all going to be a higher IRR. It's going to be higher NPV, and that'll be driven, I would say, by, like I said, the early sequencing of high grade in mine plan here. What we are seeing in our internal models is that Copala is very, very important for this. We believed earlier that Napoleon and Tajitos, would certainly be enough, and I think they were enough. But this Copala, is really something special. And so for us to find, as I said, incremental amounts to the south or to the east or to the north, or to find, a repeat or a doubling up or a uplifted block, or however you want to phrase that, of Copala, I think is going to drive the potential for higher economics. And, I don't think we're going to do ourselves. I don't think there's a lot of sense in rushing to put out these economics until we really have investigated what that uplifted block is, because, we want to be able to demonstrate a very strong NPV, strong IRR, and be in a position to rapidly move the project forward with that PEA in hand towards production.
Remind me of the dimensions of Copala. It's about 1 kilometer long, and it's from surface and dips to the east. Am I right?
That's right, yeah. So right now it's about just over 1.1 kilometers, and it dips 400 meters to the east, and on average it's 10 meters thick across that body.
Okay, and so it kind of comes down and then it steepens up, and then you've got potential some kind of repeat potentially to the east that you've only got one hole through at the moment. If it's good, it's good. If it isn't, it doesn't change much.
Well, I think if it isn't good, we'll still continue to explore that area. But if it's good, I think it changes a lot, the potential economics there.
When the guys reported, they said, "Oh look, we've got another intersection of 10 meters to the east of Copala." Did they say, "And it looks like Copala," as in could they match the rocks? Could they say, "Oh, we've got this kind of this above it, then we've got Copala look-alike, and then we've got the same rocks below it"? Were you able to tie in the geology of the two areas?
I think it might be a little bit too early for that. Let's just say, I think the theory looks to be quite good there. So we're excited to find out what may come of the uplifted block. But I think it's a bit too early to get people too excited about it, and wait till that release.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean,
about.
As you said, you're going to be putting news out on an incremental basis. So if you can take it 100 meters to the south of the existing Copala, we'll hear about it. If you can, certainly what you've just said is that look for the incremental extensions to Copala, particularly to the south, and look for the whether there's a potential repeat to the east. All of which would be good news. But I mean, as it stands with 100 and whatever it is, 10 million ounces in Copala, that's enough, particularly since you've got other resources behind it in Napoleon and Tajitos, to you've got enough for an economic enterprise.
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. And one of the things that probably is the most thrilling to me, and this is incredible too, is some of the early capex numbers that our consultants have showed to us. And when we look at comps in the area and we've done our own modeling, of course this isn't in a PEA, so it's not reliable. This is kind of just our early understandings. But when we look at the capital expenditure intensity of what it might take to build this, it's probably in line with some of the more recent builds like Silvercrest/Chispas, where it's about 175 million, 160 million, under 200 million, or maybe just a little bit over 200 million is kind of the range that we look at when we look at our comps. So, to think about building something that may be a 12, 15, even perhaps 20 million ounce per annum producer with a relatively low initial capex. There's nothing really else out like this out there in the silver space, and we're pretty thrilled about that.
Are you guys thinking open pit? I mean, do they talk to you about open pitable stuff, or are you being guided to expect an underground resource? And I know we haven't done you haven't done the trade-off studies, but just what's the chat?
Well, we've done trade-off studies on Copala, and we absolutely will be doing this as an underground mine. It's what our community is used to. It's actually what's economically best for the development there, and it's also the best way forward in Mexico right now too. So we're very happy with the idea of an underground mine.
We haven't spoken about metallurgy or metallurgical test work or mineralogy. Any comments on that?
Well, early indications on Copala is that it's much in line with what we've seen elsewhere in the district. So Napoleon had recoveries of in gold was in the low 90s and silver is in the high 80s. So really kind of well in line with what you see at some of the better operations in Mexico. I expect that Copala will probably be in line with that as well, and have early indications have shown that it's going to be excellent metallurgy there, and that's not really a surprise to us, of course, because the district and the area is kind of littered with small scale mills and simple simple flow sheet operations. So these are the type of deposits that are often pretty reasonable in terms of processing.
But you are doing the test work anyway. This in the course of this year.
Absolutely, yeah. That'll be announced later this year here. The Copala network.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting. Obviously, it would always be helpful to have a silver price that goes in the right direction to kind of put some a shoulder to the wheels, shall we say, to the share price. And we've just had a bit of a retracement in the precious metals markets for the last 3 weeks or so. But I look forward to the news flow during the course of the year, kind of ongoing drill results and various bits of news, and particularly the new resource at the back end of the year.
Well, thank you, Merlin. It's really an exciting time, for us here, and I think with our vision of becoming a very large scale producer of silver and gold through our Panuco district here, this is going to be probably the best year yet with more discovery and then de-risking. So thank you for letting me talk about that today here.